14 life-ruining games, 7 levels. The games in this iceberg have devastated and ruined lives all around the world. Let's start with some of the more famous games, but the deeper we get, the more shocking and horrific the changes will become. Let's start at the tip of the iceberg. Level 1. Lineage 2, Clan Rivalry leads to murder. The Platinum Clan members were in their 30s, seasoned players of the game Lineage 2. The Ku Klux were younger, mostly students in their 20s who played with a different kind of intensity, their clan motto declaring, "Beat everything that moves and everything that doesn't move, move and beat." In late December 2007, Albert's Platinum Warriors eliminated a Ku Klux member in a virtual battle that felt unusually personal. The Ku Klux did not take it well, erupting on the forums with accusations, threats, and heated exchanges full of outrage. Messages flew back and forth between the clans, each post more venomous than the last, until someone suggested they meet face-to-face in the real world to settle their grievances. A terrible idea. When Albert met the much younger Ku Klux members on the streets of Ufa, the confrontation turned physical almost immediately. Albert found himself in a real fight with someone half his age. The beating was severe, leaving Albert so badly injured that he never made it to the hospital alive. He died from his wounds while being transported for medical treatment. While Albert's family prepared for his funeral on December 31st, members of the Ku Klux Klan continued their campaign of intimidation. They saw Albert's death as a victory that needed to be protected and expanded. So they began targeting his sister Albina, sending her death threats that made it clear the feud did not end with him. It would continue with her and their family. The Ku Klux members refused to acknowledge that Albert's death represented the crossing of a boundary. His sister stopped using her computer entirely, afraid that any online activity would provide these people with more ammunition for their harassment. She lived in constant fear that the violence that had already consumed her brother would eventually reach her as well. The 22-year-old charged with Albert's death faced up to 15 years in prison, but he was so calm during questioning that it suggested he didn't fully grasp the permanent nature of what he had done, or he just didn't care. After all, he continued to intimidate and threaten Albert's family even after his death, acting like players who had achieved a significant victory and wanted to maximize their advantage. The death had given them a sense of power that they seemed determined to maintain through continued threats against his surviving family members. As long as Albert's family was in fear, the Ku Klux would be the dominant force in Lineage 2. His death was a victory. GTA, Anthony J. Clark. On June 2, 2018, 23-year-old Anthony J. Clark from Grants Pass, Oregon, stole a car. Typical criminal activity. Only he was in an entirely different world, seemingly convinced that he was living inside the video game Grand Theft Auto. Shortly before this happened, deputies from Jackson County Sheriff's Office were stationed at Highway 66 and Emigrant Lake Road, waiting for tow trucks to haul away vehicles from unrelated DUI arrests. Anthony had exited the passenger side of a pickup truck nearby when he approached one of the deputies with a surprising amount of directness, telling the officer exactly what he intended to do: steal the 2003 Toyota Camry sitting right in front of them. See, what the officers didn't know at the time was that Anthony was high on LSD, and it was warping his perception of reality into something completely unreal. What followed was a 40-mile chase that law enforcement described as disturbingly reminiscent of the very game Clark believed he was playing. Clark drove off the roadway, evaded police vehicles, then merged into Interstate 5 at exit 14, driving north on the shoulder of the southbound lanes. He performed a U-turn near mile marker 16 and headed south again, exactly like he was playing in a video game where there were no consequences. The drugs in Anthony's system drove him to crash through multiple industrial gates, destroy property that stood in his path, and navigate wrong way down several roads. When an Ashland police officer caught up to him, Anthony exited the interstate and drove west on Ashland Street toward Southern Oregon University, which obviously gave the police serious anxiety. His vehicle careened north on Walker Avenue, demolishing industrial gates before police temporarily abandoned the pursuit to avoid endangering civilians in the more populated area. But Anthony didn't even consider stopping. Officers deployed spike strips, successfully deflating the front tires and slowing him down. Another set of spike strips took out the rear tires, yet Anthony continued driving on the rims, just like his favorite video game. The Toyota Camry, now running on 4 flat tires, became a mobile battering ram as deputies applied multiple pursuit intervention technique maneuvers to bring the chase to its inevitable conclusion. Anthony attempted to ram a patrol car before abandoning the vehicle and fleeing on foot into the Glenwood Mobile Home Park. Even then, he was still in his GTA world trying to steal a second vehicle before officers finally apprehended him. Jackson County Sheriff's Office filed charges including attempting to elude an officer in a vehicle, attempting to elude an officer on foot, driving under the influence of intoxicants, unauthorized use of a vehicle, reckless driving, and recklessly endangering another person. Incredibly, despite the extensive property damage, dangerous driving conditions, and multiple law enforcement agencies involved in the case, no one sustained injuries during Anthony's 40-mile rampage. He seemed to know to avoid running down innocent civilians. Level 2. Free Fire. Friends teen over game ID. On the morning of March 12, 2025, 12-year-old Praveen Rathod joined his family for cumin harvesting in the fields of Kutch District, India. But the village children's focus was elsewhere. Free Fire had become their obsession, a battle royale game where they fought endlessly for ranking, for status, for virtual diamonds that somehow felt more real than anything else in their lives. The 3 friends, who would become his killers, had been playing with Praveen for months, but there was something about Praveen's game ID that they wanted desperately. Maybe it was his progress level, maybe it was accumulated points, maybe it was simply the principle of the thing, that he could refuse them anything. When he kept saying no to sharing his gaming credentials, their frustration grew and grew. The 3 met in private and all agreed that Praveen's refusal couldn't stand, that something had to be done about his selfishness, and they had to be the ones to do it. So, they called to Praveen after lunch, told him to meet them at the tucked-away little garden near the temple where they usually gathered to play. He walked there alone, but when Praveen arrived, one of them grabbed him immediately while the other 2 produced sharp objects. Knives they'd brought specifically for this moment. He was stabbed and killed on the spot. These children, still developing teenagers themselves, went for maximum damage, making cuts to his throat, deep punctures to his stomach and hands, slashes across his body that showed they intended for him to die quickly. They had been friends just hours ago. Now they were conjuring up this insane level of brutality. Once Praveen was killed, the killers heard his brothers rushing to the sound of the screaming, so they took his phone and fled toward the village. Villagers found his body later that afternoon, and the crime response began as the police went looking into what had happened. All 3 accused were quickly apprehended. But this wasn't an isolated incident whatsoever. Free Fire and similar games had been leaving a trail of destruction across India for years. In 2020, an 11-year-old named Akash Tiwari was choked to death in Surat by a 20-year-old man who wanted the child to transfer Free Fire diamond points to him. That's the same game, the same fixation on virtual assets, the same progression from digital obsession to real-world violence. When you look at the game, you see that it creates a perfect storm for this kind of escalation. Free Fire is designed to be addictive, with ranking systems that make players feel genuinely powerful, with virtual economies that seem to matter more than actual money. Children spend hours building up their avatars, collecting weapons and skins, advancing through levels that give them identity and status in ways that their offline lives often don't. When someone threatens that digital identity, the psychological blow can feel existential enough to drive people to extreme, unthinkable acts. The 3 teenagers who ended Praveen's life are now in custody, facing charges under the Juvenile Justice Act. That game might be built to tear us apart, but our channel is here to bring us together. So hit that subscribe button so we can keep making more great videos like this one. Level 3. 2019 Suzano School Shooting. On a Wednesday Sao Paulo morning in March 2019, a plan was in the works. Two former pupils, one still technically a student, parked a white Chevrolet, stepped out with rucksacks, and walked into Professor Raul Brasil's state school. Within 8 minutes, 5 teenagers, 2 staff members, and a car lot owner nearby were gone. 17 others lay wounded, and the pair had turned the gun on themselves. A massacre had unfolded in an unthinkably quick time, and the community was lost and confused about how it could have happened. Hours earlier, the younger attacker, Guilherme Tausi Monteiro, had shot his uncle at a used car business, apparently to steal the vehicle that would carry him and Luis Enrique de Castro to the school. Investigators later pieced together notebooks filled with gear lists, sketch maps, and horror movie doodles. Workers at a local LAN cafe told police the duo spent whole afternoons locked into first-person shooters, gravitating toward titles with fast kill cams and modded gore packs. They also scanned forums where the Columbine massacre was praised and celebrated, treated like a blueprint for further attacks. In those threads, they found bomb recipes, GIF loops of Columbine CCTV, and charts ranking body counts. Guilherme began wearing the black cap and skull balaclava with reversed wristwatch, all tiny cosplay tributes to Harris and Klebold, the psychos behind the Columbine massacre. Brazil's Vice President Hamilton Mourão blamed violent video games within hours of the incident, arguing that kids are glued to shooters all day. That argument, however, offered the pair exactly the infamy they craved. New banners looped footage of them stalking hallways with a revolver, crossbow, and a hatchet, bringing more attention to their crimes. Detectives found the date circled in red on a crumpled printout, 13th March, 1 month before Columbine's 20th anniversary, a slot still free on the tragic calendar. Psychological experts have since labeled the craving for sequel status the Columbine effect, a feedback loop where each rampage spawns forums, memes, and aspiring imitators. In Brazil alone, at least 13 school attacks have echoed Suzano's blueprint since 2023, with many citing the pair as inspiration. Both boys sat on the margins of school society. Monteiro had quit classes complaining of relentless taunts, slept on a sofa in a cramped house where his unemployed mother wrestled with substance dependence, and spiraled after his grandmother's death. Castro, 4 jobs in 2 years, drifted through online chat rooms full of symbols and homemade bomb instructions. All they wanted was to be remembered and cause pain to the world that had completely ignored them. In a city gym the next day, 6 coffins were set up in honor of the dead. Some parents spoke of forgiveness because they were kids too, despite the horrific and tragic acts they committed. Local policymakers argued over arming teachers, censoring games, or adding metal detectors, while teenagers who survived ended up scanning every classroom for exit routes. Nobody seemed to have any interest in addressing the actual problems. Fortnite. Argument leads to fatal shooting. 21-year-old Holden Hofsis sat in his Phoenixville bedroom with his high school best friend Daniel Gray, their attention locked on the bright blur of Fortnite rounds in the early hours of November 8, 2024. Hours of play, hard cider, and had already stretched their tempers thin. The pair had the habit of keeping Holden's loaded silver revolver within reach on the desk because he said it made him feel safe. The match ended badly for Holden. He lost, slammed the controller, and swore that lag ruined him. Daniel didn't agree with that. In his eyes, the loss was predictable because Holden was playing too recklessly to even come close to winning. That was painful and hard for Holden to take, but Daniel just didn't think to stop needling him about the situation. So Holden did what he thought was a perfectly natural reaction to the insult. He grabbed his gun. Holden told detectives later that he thought he had left the first chamber empty, a weird safety ritual he trusted. He lifted the weapon, stood, and pulled the trigger at 3:27 a.m., the bullet tearing through Daniel's chest and dropping him against the bed frame before either of them could fully process what happened. As the drug started to fade from his brain, Holden called 911 to try and get help for his tragically wounded friend. He told dispatch he had accidentally fired on his friend, that he needed help now. When police arrived fast, they found Daniel motionless on the floor and Holden pacing, the gun set on the nightstand. Officers noticed coke residue on a plate, plastic baggies, and several ounces of marijuana packaged to sell. Every item pointed toward a night already out of control before the shot even fired. The game was still paused on the defeat screen. They logged the revolver, drug evidence, and the beer bottles, then cuffed Holden and let him out. In the squad car, Holden mumbled that Daniel had gotten my face after the loss, and he just reacted. He didn't aim, he didn't plan, and the coroner pronounced Daniel dead less than an hour later. News of the shooting rolled through local feeds by sunrise, another headline tying a popular video game and a handgun to abrupt death. The district attorney called the case a sober warning about intoxicants meeting firearms, no matter the setting. Hofsas faced first- and third-degree homicide counts and sat in county jail without bail, still insisting the chamber should have been empty. Friends later said the pair played every night, sometimes arguing, but always cool by morning. But this time, morning never came for Daniel. Counter-Strike and Far Cry 2, 2016 Munich Olympia Mall shooting. On June 22, 2016, 18-year-old German-Iranian David Ali Sonboli was playing his favorite game. He had been planning this day for over a year. His bedroom walls were covered with the research materials of mass destruction, books about rampage killings, photographs from previous shooting sites, and hours upon hours of first-person shooter gameplay. David had endured relentless bullying throughout his school years. His classmates had driven him so far into isolation that he developed panic attacks whenever forced into contact with other people. He now spent most of his time locked in his room playing what investigators would later describe as killer video games. Counter-Strike's Source became his preferred escape, but he was studying these games. He used online handles like Hate, Rampage Killer, and Gunman. His fellow gamers eventually kicked him out of their Steam gaming groups because his threats had become too disturbing. Around 6 p.m. local time, David sent what would be his final message to former classmates. "Come to the McDonald's and I will come and get you and shoot you." His gaming companions dismissed it as more empty threats. They'd heard similar words before, but this time he was finally ready to move from virtual violence to real carnage. David emerged from his family's apartment carrying a 9mm Glock 17 pistol and a backpack filled with 300 rounds of ammunition. As he walked towards the Olympia shopping mall, one of Munich's largest retail centers, David was about to turn his digital obsessions into physical reality. The McDonald's restaurant attached to the shopping center became his first target. Witnesses recall seeing a man dressed in black emerge from the restaurant's bathroom before David raised his pistol with both hands and fired repeatedly at terrified customers as they fled. Bodies began falling on the stairs and sidewalks outside. From the McDonald's, David moved on to the street, continuing to fire at anyone in his path. Video footage showed him walking methodically, the same movements he had practiced thousands of times in virtual environments. The killer had selected July 22nd, marking exactly 5 years since Anders Breivik had massacred 77 people in Norway, primarily targeting young people at a summer camp. David had extensively researched Breivik's attack and even possessed a copy of the Norwegian killer's manifesto on his computer. This was a tribute to the mass destruction that had inspired his own planning. As police flooded the area with over 2,300 officers, Munich's public transportation system shut down completely, and authorities sent smartphone alerts telling the city's residents to stay indoors. For hours, the city remained paralyzed as police searched for what they initially believed were multiple attackers. His final victims included teenagers not much younger than himself, many of them immigrants like his own parents. Investigators would later conclude that he hadn't specifically targeted individuals, he just wanted to create maximum carnage. Around 8:30 p.m., roughly 2.5 hours after the shooting began, 2 police officers on a routine patrol spotted a suspicious figure walking about half a mile from the shopping center. When confronted, David ended his rampage the same way he had ended his virtual gaming sessions, with a final, decisive action. The shot that killed David Ali Sonboli was fired by his own hand, the one thing he never did in his game. Level 4. Natural Selection. 2020 Torreon school shooting in Mexico. 11-year-old Jose Angel Ramos Bates walked into his 6th grade classroom at Colegio Cervantes in Torreon, Mexico, on January 10, 2020, carrying 2 pistols belonging to his grandfather, a .40 caliber automatic and a .22 caliber weapon. He looked at a classmate and delivered a deeply unsettling message. Today is the day. Jose asked his teacher for permission to use the bathroom, taking his backpack with the excuse that he had torn his pants. When he emerged 15 minutes later, he had changed into a white t-shirt emblazoned with Natural Selection and black pants with suspenders, an outfit deliberately mimicking Eric Harris, one of the perpetrators from the 1999 Columbine massacre. The reference wasn't accidental. Natural Selection was both a first-person shooter video game and the phrase that appeared on Eric Harris's shirt during his earlier deadly rampage. Governor Miguel Riquelme initially theorized that Jose had been influenced by the video game, suggesting he was trying to recreate it in real life. The game pits players against alien invaders in violent combat scenarios, and authorities found evidence that Jose had discussed it with classmates. Armed with both weapons, Jose opened fire in the school's patio area. He first targeted 5 classmates and a physical education teacher, wounding all of them. Then came the most devastating moment. His English teacher, Maria Asaf Medina, approached him and pleaded for him to stop shooting. He responded by firing directly at her, killing her instantly. Moments later, he turned one of the guns on himself, ending his own life. The initial narrative focused heavily on video game influence, but investigators soon uncovered a far more disturbing reality. Jose's family background revealed connections to organized crime that painted a completely different picture. His father, Jose Angel Ramos Jimenez, had spent time in prison for methamphetamine trafficking in El Paso, Texas. His mother had died years earlier, most likely killed in some violent end. Jose had been living with his paternal grandparents, but their household was hardly stable. His grandfather, Jose Angel Ramos Socedo, faced investigation for money laundering and tax evasion, with authorities discovering millions of dollars in irregular transfers. The grandfather owned multiple luxury vehicles and engaged in suspicious financial activities. Even more disturbing, investigators found WhatsApp conversations on the grandfather's phone where a family member wrote, "Why did you give it to him, Dad? Do you see what happens? When I saw him, I was not surprised. I knew it was you who gave it to him." The grandfather reportedly replied, "I couldn't stop it. It was his desire." So, this was a family-aided incident. The weapons used in the attack belonged to this same grandfather who kept them illegally in the home. He was eventually arrested and charged with negligent homicide for allowing access to the firearms, but the investigation revealed that the grandfather had been working with Argentine Lord Mario Roberto Segovia. Even the boy's maternal grandmother had been killed. His whole family was so deep in violence that it seemed inevitable Jose would follow at some point. The tragedy represented Mexico's second school shooting following a 2017 incident in Monterrey. The Colegio Cervantes returned to classes a week later with metal detectors and mandatory transparent backpacks. All 6 wounded victims survived and were discharged from the hospital. Counter-Strike and Far Cry 2 2009 Stuttgart shootings. Tim Kretschmer woke up on March 11, 2009 and called his friend Dylan, much like the protagonists of his favorite video game, Super Columbine RPG. He was 17 years old and had been planning something that would shock Germany for years to come. His father kept 15 weapons and 4,500 rounds of ammunition in their family home, with a 9mm Beretta pistol stored carelessly in the parents' bedroom rather than locked away safely. Tim, who had been receiving psychiatric treatment for a while before stopping, decided to take advantage of that. At 9:30 a.m., Tim entered his former school dressed in black combat gear and wearing a gas mask. He moved through the corridors, carrying his father's weapon and extra ammunition, targeting specific classrooms on the upper floor, beginning with Class 9C during their Spanish lesson. 5 students died instantly as he fired at close range, aiming deliberately at their heads. Moving to Class 10D during their German lesson, Tim continued his march, killing 2 more students and wounding 9 others. When he left to reload, a teacher managed to lock the classroom door, but Tim's response was attempt to shoot the lock off. His final stop was the chemistry laboratory, where he killed the teacher before students began escaping through windows. Throughout his rampage, he fired more than 60 rounds, with most victims shot in the head. After the school headmaster broadcast the coded alert, "Mrs. Coma is coming," Tim fled the building, shooting a gardener at a nearby psychiatric hospital before hijacking a car and forcing the driver to take him to Wendlingen. At a car dealership, he killed a salesman and customer before police cornered him. Mobile phone footage captured his final moments as he engaged in a shootout with officers, sustaining a leg wound before turning the weapon on himself. The media focused on one thing. Tim had been an avid player of first-person shooter games, including Far Cry. So in their mind, there had to be a connection between his methodical tactical approach and the mechanics of violent video games where players move through levels eliminating targets. Other killers in Germany had also played violent games, including Counter-Strike. But the aftermath revealed disturbing details about his mindset that went way beyond gaming. Online posts showed his frustration. "I've had enough of this crummy life. People are laughing at me, and no one recognizes my potential." 8 of the 9 students he killed were girls, and all 3 teachers were women, suggesting a targeted hatred toward women. The systematic nature of the killings, combined with his interest in violent video games and access to firearms, created a perfect storm that left 16 people dead, including himself. Level 5. Teen shoots parents over seized video games. 14-year-old Nathan Brooks had been thinking about killing his parents since he was 8 years old, but it took being grounded from his electronic devices to push him over the edge. When his parents took away his video games and other electronics as punishment for being late to school, he felt it was time to do something. On the evening of March 8th, 2013, Nathan waited in his bedroom for about 90 minutes after being told he couldn't participate in an upcoming basketball tournament. He later told police that he heard voices in his head telling him over and over that he would be able to do whatever he wanted if his parents were dead. So, Nathan pried open the family's locked gun safe and retrieved a .22 caliber Smith & Wesson pistol. The family had surveillance cameras inside their home that the parents had installed to monitor whether Nathan was doing his chores as punishment. Those same cameras would later capture footage of Brooks walking through the house in his underwear, carrying the loaded weapon. Just before 10 p.m., Brooks crept into his parents' bedroom where they lay sleeping. He aimed the gun at the back of his father's head first, then turned to his mother. John was shot multiple times, including once in the forehead, while Elizabeth was shot beneath her eye, causing her eye to collapse and sustaining damage to her vision, hearing, and memory. Somehow, both survived. After emptying the pistol, the reality of what he had done finally hit Nathan, but when he heard his father moving around, he went downstairs to get more bullets from the gun safe to finish the job. By then, John was already on the phone with emergency services, and Nathan realized he needed to create a cover story.
911, what's the address of the emergency?
Somebody broke in. We've all been shot.
Okay, tell me exactly what happened.
I woke up and we've all been shot.
Who's been shot, sir?
It's my wife and I. I've been shot in the head.
He told officers he had seen an intruder in the house and had hidden until the man left. He claimed he heard screams and saw a figure moving through their home, then waited until he thought it was safe to emerge.
And this guy came down. He's A little taller than me. I was guessing 3, 4, maybe even 5 inches taller than me. He's a pretty big guy. But he loaded it back up because you hear like the tink, 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 but it was like one by one. And it sounded like he ran back up the stairs. He was up there for a little bit, and then he ran back down the stairs, opened up our rear slider door, and ran out the door. And that's the last I saw him.
But Nathan's story quickly unraveled when Detective Mike Williams revealed they had surveillance footage. The cameras had captured him running through the house with a gun in his hand, making his intruder story impossible to maintain. During his confession, Nathan revealed the depth of his resentment toward his parents' authority.
What a gun does.
Which is?
Kill.
So your goal when you walked in there was to kill both your parents?
Yes.
He told police that his mother's comment about him meeting the definition of insanity had particularly stung, and he felt trapped by their constant punishments and restrictions. The grounding from electronic devices was simply the final straw in what he saw as an ongoing battle for control over his life. Call of Duty and Gears of War, Adam Lanza. On the morning of December 14th, 2012, Adam Lanza shot his mother 4 times as she slept. He then gathered the weapons she had bought and taught him to use, drove to Sandy Hook Elementary School, and in less than 11 minutes, ended 26 lives before taking his own. But he didn't simply wake up on December 14th, 2012 and decide to carry out the unthinkable. He had been planning this for months. Law enforcement discovered evidence that his plotting began as early as March 2011, nearly 2 years before the events at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Inside his bedroom, windows were taped over with black garbage bags to block out the world, and investigators found endless research dedicated to mass violence. The most uncomfortable discovery was a spreadsheet documenting mass killings throughout history. This was a full ranking system that cataloged information about each shooting, listing details with total disconnect from the tragic consequences. One law enforcement source described it as potentially being a score sheet rather than just research, suggesting Adam intended to place himself at the top. The document also revealed his particular fixation with the 1999 Columbine massacre, which appeared to serve as his template. He had downloaded videos of the Columbine shooters Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold along with surveillance footage from that attack. His whole bedroom had become a shrine to violence. Investigators found newspaper clippings about school shootings dating back to 1891, including articles about the Northern Illinois University shooting and other massacres. There were 3 photographs of what appeared to be a bloodied corpse covered in plastic, alongside an image of him holding guns to his head. But then investigators found that the room contained an arsenal including multiple firearms, hundreds of rounds of ammunition, knives, swords, and a spear. All of this weaponry had been legally purchased by his mother Nancy, who was apparently growing concerned about her son. In the basement, Adam had created his own isolated command center. It was a windowless bunker equipped with computers, gaming consoles, and military posters covering every wall. A plumber who worked in the house described the setup as strange, noting the complete absence of natural light. He had collected a trove of violent video games including Call of Duty, Left 4 Dead, Grand Theft Auto, and Doom. The plumber described how Adam would spend hours in this basement playing Call of Duty surrounded by posters showcasing military equipment from throughout U.S. history. The family had been fans of the military, and both Adam and his brother were described as experts on historical weapons through their gaming. Most disturbing was the discovery of a computer game called School Shooting on his hard drive. Unlike commercially available games, this appeared to be something specifically focused on the act he would eventually commit. The question haunted investigators. Had he been practicing, perfecting his technique through digital simulation? His mother Nancy had the same concern. She had told friends she was worried because he had become a shut-in who hadn't left his room in 3 months. Despite living in the same house, mother and son communicated only through email. His bedroom was declared off-limits to everyone, including his mother, who was forbidden from even entering or cleaning it. On the day of his crime, Adam did his best to eliminate evidence of his planning. Before leaving for Sandy Hook Elementary, he took a hammer or screwdriver to his computer's hard drive, smashing it beyond recovery. The FBI and Connecticut State Police worked for days trying to extract data from the damaged device, but the destruction was too complete. This deliberate act of evidence destruction suggested he understood exactly what he was about to do and wanted to cover his digital tracks. And sadly, he succeeded. Level 6. Final Fantasy VIII, Jose Rabadán, the Katana Killer. Jose Rabadán was 16 years old when he changed from a timid, spoiled boy into something far, far more sinister. For months, Jose had begged his parents to get him a 71-centimeter katana for his birthday because of his fascination with Final Fantasy VIII, the video game that would later be blamed for inspiring his actions. Except, the media got it wrong, spectacularly wrong. He never finished the game, never reached the part where the protagonist's squall might harm someone close to him. The connection was a total lie fabrication, a desperate attempt to rationalize the unrationalizable, what he was planning to do. Jose's motives were extremely simple. He wanted to be alone. Not in some poetic existential way either, he just wanted his family eliminated so they couldn't follow him when he disappeared. His parents had prevented his escape attempt the year before, and in his twisted logic, dead parents couldn't chase runaway children, so they had to die. The killing began at 6:30 a.m. on April 1st, 2000. His father, Rafael, never woke up properly. He had been ended by 17 savage strikes with a katana at the hands of his son. But Rafael tried to defend himself, leaving him with severed fingers and multiple wounds before Jose finished him. Then came his mother, Mercedes, and his 9-year-old sister, Maria, who had Down syndrome. Both were woken up by the carnage, but couldn't escape their fate at the hands of Jose and his blade. With his mission complete, Jose placed plastic bags over each head, then dragged the bodies to the bathroom. He cleaned himself up, changed into fresh clothes, took 15,000 pesetas and a mobile phone, then walked out at 7 a.m. like he was heading to school. The scene he left behind was so gory that forensic investigators would spend hours cataloging the damage and still find more after. The media frenzy focused on the video games and katanas, but missed the real horror. This was so much simpler than any of that. It was just one kid who decided his family's existence inconvenienced his plans. Neighbors described him as educated, shy, reserved, never seen socializing with other teenagers. He preferred his expensive computer, a gift from the parents he would later eliminate. Jose was diagnosed with idiopathic epileptic psychosis, a condition that supposedly explained his lack of control during the killings, but his methodical cleanup suggests something very much in control. He spent 2 days evading capture before being arrested at Alicante train station. Spain's new juvenile law meant Rabadán served only 8 years, 6 in a juvenile facility, 2 under supervision. He later claimed the sword came down by itself, that his body acted without intention, and that he was completely helpless to do anything about it. Today, he lives in Santander, married with a daughter, working as a stockbroker. He's found religion and speaks at evangelical churches. Yet, 17 years later, Jose admits he still doesn't know why he eliminated his family. The boy who wanted to experience something new got exactly that, and took 3 lives in the process, which he doesn't seem to be all that regretful about. Heath High School shooting and video game lawsuit. Michael Carneal stepped into the lobby of Heath High School on December 1st, 1997, carrying a Ruger .22 caliber pistol wrapped in a blanket. He passed off the bundle as an art project, slipped in a pair of earplugs, and aimed at a group gathered for a prayer circle. With just 10 shots, 3 students fell immediately and 6 more were struck by metal fragments or spent rounds. With his attack complete, he placed the weapon on the polished floor and stood frozen. When Principal Bill Bond approached, Michael looked up and begged him to pull the trigger and end his life, seemingly unable to reckon with what he had just done. He was 14 years old. The small Kentucky town of West Paducah had never seen anything like this. The hospitals were overflowing with victims of the incident. parents forced to prepare themselves for the worst. 3 families had to cope with tragic losses. Within 18 months, those grieving families sued 25 entertainment firms for 13-figure damages, arguing that violent interactive games had trained Michael to point and shoot, making him an effective killer without teaching responsibilities needed to inhibit such a capacity. Titles like Doom and Quake were singled out, alongside movies and websites that they claimed desensitized him to harm. The legal filings claimed Michael spent hours in front of graphic screens, honing virtual sharpshooting skills late into the night. Attorneys for the families argued this relentless exposure blurred lines between game and reality, conditioning his finger to squeeze with no second thought. They basically said he did not make his own choices, which is why the defendants insisted that Creative Works could not be held responsible for an individual's acts. They noted that millions played these titles without causing this kind of damage. The case was dead before it even began. Missy Jenkins Smith lost the use of her legs and met Michael in prison a decade later. She forgave him, but still opposes his parole. Michael's own words at a 2002 hearing hinted at the desperation behind his act, saying, "Nobody loved me, and nobody cared." Level 7. Fortnite, Brazilian teen family 2025. A 14-year-old boy named Camilo Aldebaran had spent 6 years of his life nurturing what he believed was love with a 15-year-old girl he'd never even met in person. They met while playing Fortnite as children, building their relationship long distance through the game. But the girl didn't just want to meet him face to face, she demanded something much bigger: proof of his love through the killing of his entire family. The investigation revealed audio recordings and messages where this girl instructed Camilo directly about how to commit the crime, even discussing methods for disposing of the bodies afterward, including feeding them to pigs or burning them. The pressure intensified in the days leading up to the killings. The girl challenged him with a phrase that would later become central to the case: "If you love me, be a man." When Camilo's parents refused to let him travel to Mato Grosso to meet her, something inside him snapped. On the night of June 21st, 2025, Camilo waited until his parents, Antonio and Ana, fell into deep sleep. He entered their bedroom, took his father's gun from beneath the mattress, and shot both parents in the head at point-blank range. His 3-year-old brother became the final victim, shot in the neck. Camilo later told police he killed the toddler to spare him the suffering of being left alone in the world. After the killings, Camilo dragged all 3 bodies to a water cistern in the backyard, hiding them inside the concrete structure. For 3 days, he lived alone in the house, aware of what he'd done, maintaining a facade of normalcy that even fooled his grandmother. When she called on Sunday, June 22nd, concerned about the family's absence, Camilo spun an elaborate lie about his parents taking his little brother to the hospital after the child had swallowed glass. The grandmother's maternal instincts proved stronger than Camilo's deception. When she arrived at the house and found him alone with no clear explanation for his family's whereabouts, she took him to the police station to report them missing. Even then, Camilo maintained his story about the hospital visit and the swallowed glass. The truth began unraveling during the police investigation. Officers found inconsistencies in Camilo's story and discovered evidence that contradicted his claims. Bloodstains on the parents' mattress, bloody clothing, and burn marks that suggested an attempt to destroy evidence. Then, Camilo's uncle approached police with a confession that would change everything. His nephew had admitted the killings to him. When confronted with this revelation, Camilo's carefully constructed lies collapsed entirely. He confessed to the triple homicide, showing no remorse, and even stated he would do it again if faced with the same situation. As a 14-year-old, Camilo could not be tried as an adult under Brazilian law, which protects individuals under 18 from adult criminal proceedings. He was charged with acts analogous to triple homicide and concealment of corpses, facing potential detention in juvenile facilities. The 15-year-old girl also faced questioning about her role in inciting the crimes, though the specific charges against her remained under investigation. 2019 Halle Synagogue shooting. Midday on Yom Kippur, 9th of October, 2019, a thin 27-year-old named Stephen Balliet parked a rented hatchback on a quiet Halle street and stepped out in combat fatigues with a DIY shotgun slung over one shoulder. He filmed everything through a helmet-mounted action camera with the lenses level with his eyes, so whatever he did would stream in first person, the way millions normally explore in digital video game battlefields. He tries the synagogue gate, finds it locked, and mutters that he's going to go in anyway. The video captures him firing homemade slugs at the wooden door, tossing crude explosives, cursing each misfire, calling himself a loser when the lock refuses to splinter. Inside, 50-plus worshippers watched the same scene on their own CCTV feed and shoved furniture against the entry while Stephen reloads. Only 5 people were actually watching his stream live on Twitch at this point. The latency does not matter. The recording, 35 minutes long, will be replayed by around 2,200 viewers within half an hour before moderators scrub it. Twitch later said the account had existed for just 2 months and had never gained followers. The shooter knew that, yet he still behaves as if the crowd is cheering him on, addressing chat between shots, adjusting his camera angle like a seasoned streamer. Minutes before leaving home, he had posted a link to the channel on the obscure image board Mekuka, along with a zip file containing 3D printer blueprints for the weapons viewers were about to see, boasting that anyone with $50 in a weekend could copy him. His manifesto repeated a typical mix of slurs, Holocaust denial, and gender rants, ending with, "The root of all problems is the Jew," a sentence he read aloud during the stream. His crude submachine gun built from printed plastic and hardware store metal jammed every few rounds, yet it still worked well enough to keep the feed feeling like a glitchy shooter instead of real life. He had manufactured his own terror. But when he failed to breach the synagogue, Stephen pivoted to what he calls Plan B. A passerby, Jana L., complains about the noise, so he shoots her on the pavement without a second thought. Back in the car, he drives to a kebab takeaway, live narrating his search for new targets, steps inside, and kills 20-year-old Kevin S. beside the refrigerators. He then wounds 2 more people during an attempted car theft in nearby Weidersdorf, apologizing on camera for being inefficient when the shotgun's reload drags. Vital seconds tick by while police units race from other cities. Stephen is finally rammed off the road, bleeding, camera rolling, complaining that his tire burst because he fired through it by mistake. The stream ends there, but the clip had already copied itself across Telegram channels and gaming forums, earning far more eyes than he ever should have had. Fortunately, the synagogue door held, narrowly saving those innocent lives from an unthinkable massacre. In December 2020, a German court sentenced him to life with no early release, the judge calling his act the worst anti-Semitic outrage on German soil in decades. If you want to play more, why not check out this Iceberg about the most disturbing gaming crimes?